Tonight we begin our tales of life during Prohibition in the United States. If you haven't already, please take time to like and subscribe. They didn't start with speakeasies. They started with sermons. Before the jazz and the gin, before the whispers in alleyways and the knock behind the bookbindery, there were pulpits and parades and paper signs nailed to church doors that said, "Whiskey is the devil's ink." The road to the Rookery began with a prayer. 1919, the 18th Amendment was ratified. A nation exhausted by war and seduced by righteousness voted to dry itself out. Too many men had stumbled home drunk and bloody. Too many families left in ruins. Too many dollars wasted on rot gut and regret. The temperance women marched with their banners and their hymns, and Congress listened. January of 1920, the Volstead Act took effect. It didn't outlaw drinking, not exactly. It outlawed manufacturing, transporting, and selling anything that might ease your nerves or blur your grief. Suddenly the bars closed, the bottles vanished, and overnight, the thirst got clever. From 1921 to 1923, the city started to whisper. Dry laws gave birth to wet hands. In basements and behind false walls, the speakeasies opened. No signs, no windows, passwords and back doors, music and menace. Jazz took up the job that whiskey left behind. Men and women dressed like sin and danced like they couldn't get caught. But they could, and some did. 1924 to 1929. The blood came next. Bootlegging syndicates rose. Gangs made fortune on bathtub gin and smuggled scotch. Cities became war zones and fedoras and pinstripes. A bottle of shine could buy your silence or your funeral. The feds kicked in doors, but not always the right ones. And that's when the Rookery opened. It wasn't the biggest speakeasy in Manhattan, not the richest, but it was alive. It breathed smoke and bled saxophone. It kept secrets better than priests and offered confessions in the form of a stiff pour and a slow dance. You didn't find the Rookery. It found you. If you knew the knock, if you carried the card, if you had something worth forgetting. This is where our story begins. Not in the law books or the pulpits, but in the dark, where the music never stopped, and the gin still ran clear, where you walked in hoping to forget something, and sometimes walked out with something you couldn't. Welcome to the Rookery. Mind the shadows. They've been waiting. They say memory fades with time, but not mine. Mine lingers, soaked in gin and lit by neon ghosts. I drip through the cracks, through alleys and time, through backroom whispers and saxophone sighs. I'm not alive in the way you think. I'm not dead either. I'm just what's left when everything else has been forgotten. Some call me a ghost. Others say I'm the ink stain of history that refuses to lift. Me, I'm August Keene. I remember what others try to drink away. Tucked behind a shuttered bookbindery on Bleecker and MacDougal, in the part of Manhattan where the rain tastes like soot and sin. The Rookery breathes beneath the skin of the city. There's no sign, no doorbell, just 2 short knocks and 1 long, and a rook playing card tucked into your pocket. If you've got that, the bricks might shift, the shadows might clear, and you just might be let in. That night, the jazz bled through the wood and stone like it was alive. The rain outside curled on the windows, but inside the air was thick with sweat and smoke and perfume so sharp it could cut you in half. The band played like they owed the devil rent and were paying in brass and breath. And the gin. The gin tasted like heartbreak had finally learned how to sing. I drifted above it all. I always do. They don't see me. I'm not part of the story. I just watch it burn. I've seen a man light his last cigarette in a storm cellar before the feds kicked the door in. Watched a barn blaze in the Appalachians while a woman sang an old hymn and cradled a shotgun like a child. I've seen a dance floor shattered with broken glass, a lover etch a name into her heel, and a Kansas City choir girl pour poison into a senator's brandy. You don't come to the Rookery to feel safe. You come because you've lost something, or someone. That's when Reed Marshall stepped in from the storm like he owned the rain. He paused just inside the door, letting the scent of wet asphalt and cheap cologne mingle with the already suffocating perfume of the room. His trench coat dripped at the hem, collar popped high enough to hide a bruised ego. His suit was rumpled just so, like it had started the evening pressed and clean, then lost a fight with his conscience. Reed had a face made for bad decisions. Sharp jaw, clever mouth, and eyes too quick to stay put. The kind of man who polished his shoes even when the rest of his life was unraveling. His tie was knotted tight like it was trying to hold him together. It wasn't working. He scanned the room, not looking for anyone in particular, just daring someone to matter. He passed Carla and Darlene at the edge of the dance floor, both flappers painted and poised like trouble in stereo. He gave them that easy grin, the one that usually got him slapped or kissed, depending on the lighting. "Well now," he said, "what are you two celebrating?" Carla didn't even glance his way. "Freedom from questions like that." Darlene flicked ash from her cigarette with a practiced snap. "And from men who think we need a reason to dance." Reed chuckled and moved on, ego intact but dented. He slid onto a bar stool like it owed him something. Casey, behind the bar, didn't flinch, just raised a brow and poured from the nearest bottle. "You look like gin," she said, setting the glass in front of him. "What's the good kind?" he asked, tilting it back with the weariness of a man who's been looking for answers in the bottom of every glass. "The kind we don't waste on strangers." Becky was singing that night. She had one of those voices that sound like it had been soaked in bourbon and hung on a clothesline to dry in Harlem. The kind of voice that made you forget your debts for 3.5 minutes. The kind that made the room lean in without realizing. Reed leaned too. His fingers tapped the rim of his glass. But I wasn't watching him anymore. My eyes went to the shadows. And that's when I saw her, Millie Duvall, standing at the edge of the bar like she was measuring the room for danger. Millie wasn't the kind of woman most noticed right away, and that was her secret weapon. Hair pinned back in no-nonsense spirals, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a pencil stuck behind one ear. She had the look of someone who'd been underestimated her whole life and learned how to make that work for her. She leaned over the bar, whispering something to Casey, who slid her a folded note and a bottle without missing a beat. A nod passed between them, brief and sharp. Then Millie was gone, slipping through the side door near the record player. I followed, through the floorboards, through the dust and wood and bone of this place, down to the belly of the beast. Millie's basement smelled like copper and citrus and old secrets. They still crouched in the corner like something half alive, cobbled together from radiator coils, teapots, and stolen chemistry gear. She moved among it like a priestess tending her altar. "Batch 118, she muttered, adjusting a valve. "Orange peel's a hair strong, but it'll mellow once it breathes." She scribbled something into a notebook smudged with fingerprints and juniper oil. "Millie used to teach chemistry at Bernard, back when the world made sense. Back before her fiancé got caught smuggling crates of Bordeaux and disappeared somewhere off the Long Island Sound. They never found his body, just a blood-soaked ledger and a boot with the laces cut. She never taught again, but she distilled like a woman possessed. Her gin was legend, not because it hit hard, though it did, but because it tasted like clarity, juniper, mint, blood orange, regret. It was memory in a bottle, and people would kill for it. She crouched beside the copper tub, listening for that soft hiss she liked. The kind that told her the vapors were dancing right. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the still. "Sing for me." And somewhere above her, the jazz answered back. I remember the first time I tasted Millie's gin. It was summer, sticky and mean, the kind of heat that makes your shirt cling like guilt. Casey handed me a glass like she knew what it would do to me. I brought it to my lips, expecting another scorcher, something raw and bitter like most bathtub pours. But what hit me was something else entirely. It was bright, startlingly clean for something born in a boiler room. Notes of juniper, sure, but also citrus and a whisper of mint, the kind that brushes past your lips before you can catch it. Then came the heat, a slow and curling, not a burn but a glow, like the warmth of a confession told in confidence. It didn't just sit in your mouth, it settled behind your ribs, like someone pressing a match to the paper walls around your heart. That gin made you remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten. Made you feel like maybe, just maybe, you could survive one more night in this city without unraveling. People killed for lesser spirits. They'd slit throats in alleys and leave calling cards soaked in blood, just to get a crate of what Millie could conjure in a week. And here she was, alone with her copper and steam, her notebook of haunted recipes, making magic while the rest of the world drank it down and forgot her name. She ran a hand over the pipework like she was petting an old dog. "You're holding steady tonight, girl," she said under her breath. "You're the only one who hasn't let me down." She crouched beside the still again, checking a pressure gauge made from a repurposed coffee scale. The whole contraption was part science fair, part graveyard salvage. It had started as a bootleg model she bought from a man who claimed he once built engines for Henry Ford. Since then, it had grown appendages, pipes that twisted like brass vines, a cooling coil coiled through a stolen radiator, and a repurposed teapot lid screwed tight with red ribbon around the base. The heart of it, what Millie called the soul, was a copper kettle she'd hammered herself, polished to a dark shine, the lid sealed with beeswax and string. A thermometer dangled just above it, numbers long since worn away. She didn't need it anyway. Millie could hear the temperature in the hiss, feel the purity of the drip just by watching the clarity of the bead. Every joint was soldered by her hand, every line tested in silence, every burst and blowout memorized and improved. It wasn't a still. It was a legacy wrapped in copper and fire, and the only thing in the building that made more miracles than Becky's voice or a blonde stare. Harlan Drew had the kind of face that always looked like it was halfway through a bad decision. Mid-40s, grizzled jaw, a nose that had been broken at least once, maybe twice. His overcoat was wool, brown, and slightly too long, like it used to belong to someone taller or better off. He chewed toothpicks like they owed him money and never let a glass of gin go unfinished, no matter how warm or watered down. He hadn't always been a bottom feeder, used to run collections uptown for a man who called himself a banker, but didn't work near a single vault. Then he made the mistake of skimming off the top, a habit that got him kneecapped and thrown into the East River with bricks in his coat. Somehow, he floated, came crawling back through alleyways and opium dens until he found the Rookery, or it found him. He earned his place slowly, quietly. He knew the value of secrets and the danger of speaking them too loud. These days, he brokered favors and girls and rumors like a man who'd already paid in blood. In the back, where the smoke curled thickest and the floorboards moaned like old regrets, Harlan Drew was making a deal. The girl sitting across from him looked young, too young. Her dress was borrowed, her lipstick uneven, her hands clenched tight around a water glass. She didn't belong in the Rookery, and she knew it. "You sure about this?" Harlan asked, voice low but firm. She nodded barely. "You don't speak unless you're spoken to," he said, sliding a black rook card under her empty glass. "Smile if he does. Say thank you, and leave the way you came." He stood and nodded toward the back booth. The curtains were drawn, shadows inside shifting. She swallowed and walked, heels clicking like a clock counting down. Inside, Locke sat alone. His presence filled the booth like fog, measured, still, dangerous. He didn't look up at first. Let her feel the weight of the room. Let her speak first. "I'm looking for someone," she said. He looked up then, eyes pale and unreadable. "Name?" Eli Foster. He's my brother." Locke leaned back, fingers tapping the table like a metronome. "He owe you money, or are you just sentimental?" She bristled. "He's in trouble. He was working with someone, a job. Then he disappeared." Locke poured 2 fingers of gin into a glass, then set it in front of her. "And why come to me?" "Because I heard you find people, and you don't ask too many questions." He watched her, studied the cracked varnish on her nerves. "Finding's the easy part," he said. "Bringing back, that's the work, and expensive." She picked up the glass then, didn't drink. "I'll pay," she said. Locke gazed over to her. "You already are." The silence stretched long, broken only by the hum of saxophone through the walls. Then Locke's hand moved, slow and deliberate, retrieving the photo she'd pulled from her coat pocket. It showed Eli and a few others, half smiling in the sun. Shadows behind them hinted at something darker. "I can find him," Locke said again. "But once you open this door, you don't get to close it. Understand?" She nodded, this time without hesitation. The girl left Locke's booth with her eyes fixed on the floor, as if the secret she now carried had weight enough to snap the heel from her shoe. The gin sat untouched. Sebastian Locke wasn't just a man. He was a blueprint for every spy master and scoundrel to follow. British by birth, his accent still clung to his vowels like fog to a dock lamp. Before Manhattan, he'd served in shadows, British intelligence during the war, if the rumors were true. He'd once passed through Berlin with a diplomatic pouch and left 3 missing men in his wake. No one could prove anything, but no one doubted it either. Now, Locke was the architect of the Rookery. He didn't own it, not legally, but every deal, every introduction, every unspoken rule passed through him like breath through lungs. If Vera was the club's muscle, and Millie its alchemist, Locke was the soul, cunning, quiet, and colder than the gin he poured for strangers. He didn't drink much, didn't need to. He could see through people without the crutch of alcohol. Sat in his booth most nights like a spider waiting for the right vibration in the web. Hands always clean, suit always dark, eyes always watching. He didn't speak unless it mattered, and when he did, mattered a hell of a lot. Then she walked in, the blonde. It was like someone turned down the sax and turned up the static in the air. Not a head turned quickly, but every man in that room felt her before they saw her. She moved like a film reel slowed just for her. Hips whispering secrets with every step. Her hair was platinum champagne, brushed smooth and parted like she knew symmetry was power. Waves curled just under her jaw, tucked neatly behind one ear, where a pearl earring winked like it had survived something scandalous. Her eyes were hidden behind lashes long enough to cast their own shadows. And her lips, painted red like she'd kissed a matchbook closed, curved slightly, like she knew a joke that no one else would get. She wore a red slip dress that clung like spilled wine, the fabric soft enough to make velvet jealous. The hem grazed her knees, teasing a glimpse of silk-stocked legs that shimmered with each step. The seams ran straight up the back, a line you wanted to follow if you didn't mind getting lost. Her heels tapped like a countdown. Her gloves were black, satin, the fingers long and elegant. Gripped a cigarette that hung unlit between her lips, where it hung like a dare. She hadn't even asked for a light. She didn't need to. The room would have burned itself down to give her one. I imagined she smelled like trouble softened by lilac, or maybe the last whiff of perfume left on a lover's collar after they've gone. That kind of scent that gets into your memory and takes up permanent residence. She didn't ask to be seen. She didn't need to be. She slid into a booth like she'd been expected, smoothing her dress beneath her with one gloved hand, the other laying a small envelope on the tabletop. Then she waited, back straight, eyes scanning, cigarette poised. Vic Talbot hadn't seen her yet, but he would. And when he did, the room would change again. But just before his eyes found her, something else lit a fire in the room. Vera. She was behind the bar, leaning in with one hand pressed flat against the wood, the other curling slowly around the wrist of a man who didn't know how to keep his hands to himself. He was laughing, but it curdled halfway out of his throat. "Didn't mean nothing by it," he slurred, eyes wide now. Vera didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "You touch any of my girls again, and you'll leave with fewer fingers than you walked in with." She released his wrist and nodded toward the door. 2 regulars flanked him before he could think about arguing. He stumbled out, ego bruised deeper than any bone Vera had to break. She wiped her hands with a bar rag like she'd just cleaned a glass. Vera had once run numbers for a Harlem outfit that didn't believe in second chances. Then she moved into enforcement, because no one expected the redhead to hit first, let alone hardest. She managed the Rookery with the same discipline she used to run dice and bodies. Efficiently, ruthlessly, and with perfectly manicured nails. She didn't suffer fools, or drunks, or men who thought no was a negotiation. With the dancer safe and the rhythm back on track, she turned, finally, and caught sight of the blonde. So did Vic. He didn't speak at first, just stood there like a man who'd been punched in the memory. His boots didn't move, but something behind his eyes cracked open. Then, quiet as confession, he crossed the room. She hadn't moved. Still sat straight in her booth, cigarette balance between red lips, eyes watching the smoke curl from other people's lives. Vic reached into his pocket, struck a match. The flame hissed softly to life. He leaned in and held it steady. The tip of her cigarette caught. She inhaled, deep, slow, then turned those long lashes on him. "Evening, Vic," she said, like they had just missed each other at lunch. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said. His voice was even, but it wore too many coats of paint to hide the cracks. "I know, that's why I came." He slid into the booth across from her, slow, careful, like the seat might bite. His hand hovered near the envelope but didn't touch it. "You shouldn't be here," he said. She exhaled a ribbon of smoke. "Neither should you, but here we are." The space between them was loaded now, like someone had stacked dynamite and lit the fuse just slow enough to save her. Vic's eyes flicked to the envelope again. "Is it about Eli?" he asked. "It's about all of us," she said, voice softer now. "About what we buried and who we buried it for." Whatever was in that envelope, it wasn't just ink and paper. It was blood, sealed in memory. I could feel it from where I hovered, could taste the air shift, bitter, metallic, like truth had started to bleed through the seams of the night. And the night wasn't done whispering yet. Locke found Vera in the back hallway, just past the kitchen door where the clatter of pans gave way to murmurs and shadow. She was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, the sharp edge of her frustration just barely concealed beneath her lipstick. "We're running low," she said without preamble. Locke nodded, unsurprised. "What's the damage?" "The last shipment barely made it past Albany. 2 barrels busted. 1 got pinched by the feds. The rest had to be buried under chicken feed in the back of a truck. We're down to a week's worth, if we're lucky." Locke sighed, brushing a fleck of lint from his sleeve. "Millie won't be pleased." Millie's already tightening her pores. That last batch she cut with lemon peel and lavender just to stretch it. "And how'd it taste?" "Like desperation with a floral finish. The regulars didn't notice, but the ones with money, they always notice." Locke looked toward the dance floor, where the band had started a new number. "Too much heat on our usual routes. The syndicate's jittery. If we press too hard, we lose more than barrels." Vera pushed off the wall, voice low. "Then we find new routes, new partners, or we'll start making enemies that we can't afford." He met her eyes, cool and calculating. "You suggesting we go independent? I'm suggesting we survive however we have to." Locke was silent for a beat. Then he gave a single nod. "I'll send feelers out to the Carolinas. There's a mountain crew with a reputation for quality. Moonshine that doesn't blind you. Might be time to diversify." Vera smirked. "Moonshine in Manhattan? That'll go over well." "People drink dreams, Vera," he said. "They don't care where it comes from, so long as it burns just right." She leaned in slightly. "Then let's make sure it burns hot enough to keep us out of the cold." The hallway grew quiet again. Just the steady hum of risk, and the silent agreement of 2 wolves watching their forest shrink. The night pressed on, and the gin kept flowing. They didn't say much for a while after that. Just stood in the hush of that hallway, breathing the kind of silence you only get with people who bled beside you. Vera was the one who broke it. "You remember the Tremont bust?" Locke's mouth pulled into a tight line. "You and me under the same table, listening to boots on the floorboards and praying that barrel of sour mash didn't blow. We lost 3 crates, half our customers, and your coat to that raid. Wasn't the coat I minded. It was the look on your face when you thought they had me." He said nothing, but his silence said everything. That was the first time Locke realized she wasn't just muscle. She was something worth protecting. Since then, they'd watched each other's backs like the city was a loaded deck. And everyone else was holding razors. "You think we'll make it through this one?" Vera asked, voice low. Locke finally looked at her. "We always do, but we might come out thinner, meaner." She smirked. "Good, I'm tired of playing nice." They shared a look, the kind that only 2 people who've seen each other crawl out of smoke and sirens can share. Then they turned, stepped back into the pulse of the Rookery, and let the city try to swallow them whole. In the back of the club, past a curtain that barely muffled the hum of the band, 2 dancers stood before a cracked mirror lined with yellow bulbs. Josie was pinning her curls while Nell smudged rouge onto her cheeks, the 2 of them trading glances like sisters might, familiar, weary, loyal. Josie sighed. "Did you hear about the raid on Sullivan Street?" Nell nodded, dabbing powder over the shine on her brow. "Boys say they took 12 people. One of them was just a piano player. Poor thing, barely had time to finish his cigarette. They say the feds are coming down harder. No more warnings, no more bribes." Josie paused, eyes flicking toward the door. "You think they'll come here?" Nell hesitated. Every night I dance, like it might be the last time I see the lights come up. But Locke's got eyes in every corner, and Vera'd chew the cuffs off before she let him take us quietly. Josie gave a soft, sad laugh. Still doesn't stop the dreams. I see boots every time I blink. Nell leaned closer, lipstick now in hand, tracing Josie's lip with a steady finger. Just keep moving. That's what Mama always said. Don't freeze. Don't flinch. Just keep dancing. They stood there a moment longer, letting the music and fear hang together like cigarette smoke. Remind me again why they did it? Josie asked. Why ban the bottle? Because too many men came home drunk and didn't say sorry, Nell said. Because factory lines were slowing and church pews were empty. Because temperance women thought they could fix a nation by drying out its soul. Josie nodded, as if those words were a hymn she'd heard too many times. Funny, Nell added. Now the only ones drinking are the ones who can pay for protection. The club pulsed louder. It was almost time. Josie stepped back, smoothing her fringed dress, touching her stocking seam for good luck. Nell leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. See you out there, Firefly. Josie smiled. You always do. Then she disappeared through the velvet curtain, heels clicking toward the heat and light and danger waiting on the stage. Out front, Harlan had just made it to the entrance when a sharp knock rattled the small service door beside it. He cracked it open. A boy, no more than 15, thrust a folded note into his hand and vanished down the alley like smoke. Harlan read it once, then again. His lips tightened. He shoved the note into his coat and hustled toward the back, weaving through couples and cocktail trays with an urgency that didn't belong in a place like this. He found Locke near the bar, eyes already narrowed. Harlan didn't speak, just handed him the note. Locke unfolded it, scanned the words, then looked up at Vera. 2 blocks over, he said. Feds busted Delancey's. Half the staff's in cuffs. They say it was fast, clean, no warning. They're sweeping the district. We could be next. Vera glanced at the band, at the girls, at the crowded room breathing easy on the edge of disaster. So what now? We shut it down? Call it early? Locke folded the note and slid it into his pocket. We do what we always do. Vera's lips curled. Damn right. He looked to Harlan. Tell the floor. Keep everything tight. We lock the back. Keep the knock short. And keep our ears open. They can go to hell, Vera muttered. We keep going. And so the band played louder. The drinks poured smoother. And the shadows stretched deeper. Just the way the Rookery liked it. Vic stared at the envelope like it had teeth. He hadn't touched it since she set it down. Hadn't even let his hand drift too close, like it might burn him through the table. But now, something in her voice, it's about what we buried, had unlocked the rusted gate in his ribs. He reached out. His fingers were rough, square-tipped, the kind that had broken more noses than promises. But they trembled as they slid the envelope closer. The seal was already loosened. All he had to do was tip it forward. One black and white photograph slid out. It was creased at the corners, smudged with age, but clear. 5 people stood in the frame, posed outside a crumbling row house. Young, careless. Before the rot set in, at the center, Eli Foster. Smiling, arms slung around a girl with freckles and a ribbon in her hair. To his right, Vic. He flinched, visibly, like someone had whispered a name he hadn't heard in a decade. He didn't remember this photo being taken. Didn't remember smiling like that. The other 2 men flanking them were harder to place. One had a scar above his lip. The other was already half shadow, even in the bright daylight. But the 5th figure, just over Eli's shoulder, was unmistakable. Sebastian Locke. Not dressed like he did now. No crisp suit, no tie. Just a dark shirt with sleeves rolled and a cigarette in hand. Young, but with the same stillness in his eyes. Like he already knew how the story would end. Vic stared at the image. "You held on to this?" he asked, voice gone husky. The blonde nodded. Her glove traced a corner of the photo. "It's the last time any of them were seen together." "Where was it taken?" She looked at him, long, quiet. "Just outside the Tremont job, the night before everything went sideways." Vic let that settle. The Tremont job. That was the one Locke never talked about. The one that left bodies and questions in every alley. "And Eli?" She finally looked away. "He walked away from the job, didn't go inside, said something didn't feel right." Vic exhaled. His hands were steady now. Her deep eyes cut to him. "I'm not here to accuse. I'm just here to find out what happened to Eli, and why everyone in this picture but me has blood on their hands, or ghosts in their closets." She looked at Vic again, softer now. "You're the only one left who might tell me the truth." He looked down at the photo one last time, then folded it, stuffed it back in the envelope, and stood. "We can't talk here," he said. "Too many ears." She hesitated just for a heartbeat, then followed, the air around the booth still thick with memory and ash. The band had slid into something slower, notes stretching out like the legs of a dancer who didn't care who was watching. Smoke curled above the bottles, above the heads bowed in conversation and sin. Reed Marshall. He'd sunk into the bar like it owed him an apology, half a grin still hanging off the corner of his mouth, tie loose, shirt unbuttoned just enough to make you wonder. He was laughing too loud, smiling too quick. And beside him, a redhead with eyes like cut garnet and a smile made for second chances. She was younger than her dress wanted you to think. Legs crossed, one hand curled around a glass she barely touched. She let Reed talk, let him brag, let him melt. That's when he said it. "Enjoy the gin, sweetheart," he slurred, low and sweet like a lullaby. "Come morning, this place'll be ash." She blinked. Just once. Didn't say a word. Reed chuckled and sipped again. "Fed's got the blueprints. Roster too. Hell, I'm the reason they haven't kicked the door in yet. Waiting on my word. Just waiting." He laughed like it was all a game, like the room he was poisoning hadn't offered him warmth, music, mercy. The redhead didn't laugh. She just tilted her head, gave a slow blink, and rolled her eyes, not at him, but past him, toward the end of the bar, where Vera stood like a statue carved out of red velvet and bad decisions. Her posture didn't change, but her knuckles whitened against the polished wood. Just a flick of her eyes, tracking the redhead as she slipped off her stool and vanished toward the back hallway like a rumor you couldn't quite catch. Vera waited one beat, two, then she moved. No hurry, no panic, just the slow grace of someone about to end a problem with precision. She found Locke at his booth, glass full, untouched, the rim sweating in time with the rest of the room. She leaned in, close enough for her lips to graze his ear. All I caught was a name, Reed. Locke didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just stood, straightened his jacket, and moved. He slid through the room like a cold idea, gathering shadows. First Vic. He was in the alley out back, still talking to the blonde, the envelope tucked tight in his coat. Then Harlan, lurking near the coat check, whispering sweet poison into a flapper's ear. Locke didn't speak, just passed him, slow and steady. Harlan stubbed out his cigarette, rolled his shoulders, fell in behind, Now they were three, moving like a tide, quiet, inevitable. And Reed, still at the bar, still talking. His voice louder now, the last drink hitting him like a hammer wrapped in velvet. He didn't know he was already dead. And me, I watched. That's all I ever do. I watched as the wolves circled their own. Watched the last good chance slip through Reed's fingers. Watched the night make its next choice. Locke reached the bar slow, like a man with all the time in the world. Reed was mid-laugh, spinning another half-false tale about his time in Havana, when Locke's hand settled on his shoulder. The whole room seemed to still. Reed looked up. "Sebastian," he said a little too brightly, "didn't see you come in." Locke didn't smile, didn't blink. He leaned in close, his voice low enough it didn't disturb the dust. "Come with me." Reed tried to keep the grin, but it cracked around the edges. "Look, if this is about the girl earlier." Locke's fingers moved, slow and deliberate, curling around the back of Reed's neck. Not tight, not rough, just enough to make the hairs stand up. Enough to say, "You don't get to leave now." "You feel that," Locke murmured. "That's the spot a mother cat carries her runt. Light touch, no fuss. Just the truth between teeth." Reed stiffened. Locke stepped back. And Reed, who always knew how to bluff his way through a losing hand, stood like a man trying to remember what his legs were for. Okay, he muttered, raising his palms. "Let's just talk." They didn't. Vic was already moving, stepping in from the side like thunder that had been waiting for the lightning. Harlan followed, hands loose at his sides, one eye narrowed like he was sizing up a debt about to be collected. Reed saw them and panicked. The words came fast now, slurred at the edges. "You touch me and this place is finished. I'm with the Bureau. I could have the whole block swarming in minutes." Locke smiled. God, it was the coldest thing in the room. "Funny," he said. "You said they were waiting on you." Reed froze. "Well," Locke continued, his tone dry like desert wind, "if you don't come back, maybe that buys me some time." Reed's face twisted, panic shifting to desperation. "You don't understand. I'm not just some foot soldier. I know names. I know your name." Vic didn't flinch. Harlan cracked his knuckles. "You think you're making a mistake," Reed whispered, voice cracking now. "I can help you. I can tell them you're small potatoes, that there's nothing worth." Locke raised a hand, a single finger. Reed shut up. Vic grabbed one arm, Harlan the other. They didn't jerk him, didn't drag, they just walked. Like gentlemen leading a drunk friend to fresh air. But this wasn't air Reed was heading for. This was the kind of dark you don't come back from. And I watched them disappear into the shadows near the staff door. Watched the smoke drift back in behind them, sealing the path like the night had swallowed the evidence whole. That's the thing about betrayal in a place like this. It's not the first sin, it's the last. They say Reed was found 3 days later. The rope was still around his neck, swollen tight and quiet. The blocks, 2 of them, from the basement of the Rookery were tangled in the nets of a fisherman down the Hudson, just shy of the Jersey shoreline. No wallet, no badge, just a soggy cigarette tucked behind one ear and a note in his coat pocket that read, "You talk too much." By then, Millie had already dismantled her still. She packed it piece by piece, wrapped the copper in old linens, polished each joint like a relic. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just worked with the kind of reverence a mother shows a newborn she knows the world won't be kind to. Locke and Vera, they were already gone, scouting somewhere farther uptown or maybe down the coast. Rumors say they found a place with cleaner floors and thicker walls, somewhere with fresh jazz and colder gin, somewhere the knock's different, and the cards are red instead of black. But the game stays the same. As for Vic, he stuck around a little longer. He said it was to settle some things, tie up loose ends. But I saw the way he looked at the photo that blonde left behind. The way he ran his fingers over Eli's name like it still owed him an answer. Maybe it did. Maybe it always will. And me, I stayed behind for a while. Let the smoke clear. Let the city forget. That's what it does best. You see, these places never last. They flicker, burn bright, then vanish, swallowed by headlines and handcuffs. But I remember. I always do. Because long after the bottles are smashed, the songs are silenced, and the ghosts have scattered. Funny thing is, none of this would have happened if the gin had been legal. Reed wouldn't be drifting down the Hudson like yesterday's lie. Millie wouldn't have had to build miracles in a basement with stolen kettles and whispered recipes. The girls wouldn't have to dance like every night was borrowed. And Vera wouldn't have to break bones just to keep a room safe. If the law had just let people drink in peace, the Rookery would have never been born. But then again, neither would I. That's the thing about Prohibition. It didn't stop the drinking. It just changed who got to do it out in the open. The rich found ways. Country clubs, private parlors, little keys to hidden lockers at the Waldorf. But the rest of us, we built cathedrals in the dark and prayed to the gospel of gin. And yet, not everyone came. There were folks who kept their coats dry, kept their collars starched, their hands folded in prayer or trembling over ration coupons. They didn't know about the Rookery, didn't want to. They stayed home, listening to the radio crackle while the rest of the world frayed at the edges. Maybe they went to sleep early, kissed their babies goodnight, worried about the price of bread or the sound of boots overseas. Maybe they thought they were safer that way, upright and untouched by the smoke and the sin and the jazz. Maybe they were right, but I wonder about them. What did they fear more? Breaking the law, or the illusion that the law protected them? Because while they lit candles and said grace, down here we lit matches and said, pour me another. Truth is, whether you sipped communion wine or bathtub gin, the world still kept burning. And if you ask me, between the fire and the silence, I'd rather burn. They like to say Prohibition started in the cities, where bootleggers wore silk ties and poured gin through hidden walls. But that's only half the truth. Long before Congress dried out the country, the hills were already wet. In Appalachia, they didn't need a bar to drown in. They had hollows and kinfolks and recipes older than the Republic, long before the Ballsteed Act, before the Fed raids and whiskey wars. The mountains had their own kind of liquor, clear as creek water and twice as dangerous. Moonshine, they called it, white lightning, panther piss, Mountain Dew. It wasn't brewed for elegance or etiquette. It was made for warmth and survival, for lighting the blood on cold nights and buying shoes when the land gave up. You didn't drink it to forget. You drank it to remember who you were and what it took to stay that way. When Prohibition hit, the cities turned to crime, but the hills, they just kept on going, like they always had. The stills got buried deeper. The runs got faster. The law came knocking, but the mountains didn't answer. Atlanta, Charleston, Nashville, each one a furnace for thirst and fury. The city folk were willing to pay top dollar for a mason jar that smelled like bark and iron. And so the runners came, wild girls with grit in their teeth, boys with grease-stained knuckles and homemade mufflers. They moved crates by mule, by train, by Ford flatbed, with the plate switched at every county line. Some got rich, most got shot. A few just disappeared, like smoke swallowed by a dark valley. But the shine kept flowing, because no law could stop a hunger passed down through blood. No badge could outpace a mule on a switchback road. And somewhere, out past the last lantern, just below the ridgeline, A woman named Red Nell was still boiling up miracles in copper and fire. Her brother, Eli Foster, had come down from the north, running from ghosts and debts with names like Locke and Rookery. And someone else, someone fierce and fast named Bertie Sue McKinnon, had already kicked up dust in their direction. But all that comes later. Right now there's a train, cutting through the dark. Windows glowing like fireflies. Wheels clattering a rhythm older than the blues. I'm riding it, of course watching, from where no one sees. Up ahead, Cinder Gap waits like a secret. The mountains lean close. The trees hold their breath. And then it comes, that long, low whistle. The kind that sounds like warning and promise all at once. The whistle fades, but the echo lingers, long and low, like something mourning in the hills. The train cuts through a bend, metal shrieking against the curve. Inside, the few passengers left nod off beneath dim lanterns, heads bobbing like reeds in wind. Somewhere behind me, a conductor hums a hymn that doesn't know it's already been forgotten. The kind of tune you only hear when the air gets thin and the trees close in tight around you. I drift through the rail car like I always do, quiet as dust, slow as time. No ticket, no seat, just memory trailing behind like smoke from a dying match. Outside the window, the mountains are turning blue-black. The trees look like they never had mercy. And just past the glass, fog begins to roll, thick and wet, coiling through the pines like old regrets. Cinder Gap isn't marked on most maps. That's on purpose. It's a place where people go to vanish, or be born into something harder. A town carved from stone and stubbornness, tucked between ridge lines like a secret. The kind of place that doesn't bother with welcome signs. You're either from there, or you're not. Down in the valley, Red Nell is already moving barrels beneath brush and tarp. Eli Foster is pacing her porch with a cigarette and a loaded past. And somewhere in the woods, Bertie Sue is riding like the wind's got teeth. You'll see. Next time, our tale of life during Prohibition will take us into the fog and thunder of Cinder Gap, Tennessee, where the moonshine runs hot, where secrets are measured in proof, and where not even the dark runs deeper than the dead of memory. I'll be waiting.